everyone. Thanks so much for joining us for this week's episode of When I Grow Up. On today's episode, I have a acquaintance of mine that I met quite a few years ago, but somehow we've reconnected. Her name is Joy Lee, and she's here to tell us about more of what she does today. Hey, Joy, how are you?
Hi, Blair. I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing fine. How have you been? Like, it's been forever.
I know. I feel like we met through like one of the most lovely people in the world.
Yes,
Hi, Diana.
Yes.
And we've met a few times after that, but I've been good, just learning how to be an adult.
Yes, it's
Yeah.
not an easy thing, but it seems like from what
Yeah.
social media tells me, you've been doing okay for yourself.
Just learning. Yeah.
Yes. How's COVID been since the pandemic? You mentioned before we started recording that nothing has much changed for you really as far as work goes.
Right. And so when everybody was starting to work from home in March or February-ish, I was like, oh my gosh, my dream come true. Like I'm going to be able to work from home. And then I worked from home for about 2, 3 weeks. And then I got the call to come back into the office. So I've been going in to my workplace physically in the office for a bit now.
Wow.
But it's very limited. So it's still very safe. Only 5 or 6 of us have been going in.
Oh, okay. Okay. So, well, let's get into what it is that you actually do at the office. Joy is the press secretary for the House of Representatives. Am I saying that correctly?
Yes. And so, yeah, I work in the House of Representatives, but in particular for the Speaker of the House.
Which is like for me so incredible and so cool because one, it's a job that I just don't think about, right?
Mhm.
Because if I'm completely honest, and I hope I don't at me people, but like I'm not like fully in the political world. I don't really put that much of my time and effort into reading about things. However, I do care about what's going on in the world. But you're here to tell us a little bit more about what your job actually is. I'm not going to ask you any like political things, okay?
Yeah.
Because I can't. And
We might need more than an hour. Yeah.
Okay, well, Joy, so what do you do? Like, what does your job entail?
So, I mean, it's hard to describe in just a few words because it just every day is so different
Hmm.
for anybody in politics. But I would say, I mean, if you've seen any movie or TV show like surrounding politics, and you always see like that press person who helps write their statements, kind of helps conduct press conferences where you see like a politician behind a podium. You keep your boss updated on news, like what is the most important thing happening? What does she or he need to be aware of? And press events, a lot of events. So we've got lots of events always going on Capitol Hill. So I kind of help with planning and conducting those. And of course, social media is a big part of press as well. So I mean, it encompasses so many things,
Mm.
but overall, big picture, it's kind of like keeping that person's image in the public eye in a good way. So you're kind of an image controller, I guess.
So, you in particular, do you do this only for the Speaker of the House or like the House of
Yeah.
Representatives as a whole?
So my job is particular to the speaker, and it's not just me in our press office. It's we've actually got quite a big team, so
Mm.
everyone kind of has their own piece of the pie. But a big part of my job really is kind of just keeping the Speaker of the House updated on news, making sure that she kind of gets out there in public what she envisions for her image and what she wants her constituents in San Francisco, because she's from San Francisco, to know. We also communicate with reporters. I mean, that's also something I forgot, but a big part of our job is talking with reporters, helping them kind of write their stories, getting a quote in there if we think it's necessary, but also if they want to interview my boss, then I kind of have to schedule and conduct that as well.
Okay, wow. Okay. It's a lot of stuff that you are
Yeah, I
responsible
know.
for. So, like, I know you said every day is a little bit different, but could you, I mean, just take us through like one day, for example, you wake up in the morning and then what happens after that?
So usually I would wake up in the morning, and the first thing that I try to do is kind of look through the news, what happened overnight, because news is always breaking. And I think people in the general public know that as well. Like you wake up and you're like, oh my gosh, like what happened? So you kind of stay updated on the news, and I try to do that in the morning. And then when I go to work, it kind of depends on the day. But for example, like today, we had a funeral service for the police officer who died
That's right.
in the attacks on the Capitol on
Mm,
January 6th. So basically, I went into the office, kind of got started in planning what are the communications needs, the press needs for this funeral, because
mhm,
the Speaker of the House always helps plan these funerals in the Capitol. So, how many cameras are going to be there? And especially now with COVID, how can we social distance? And how many reporters do we want to invite? What angle do we want them to see this, event in? How can we, use the press to be able to bring attention to the police officers' families in a good way, so that they know that, the country is mourning with them, and hopefully that'll bring some comfort to them. And so today it was a lot about the funeral service.
mm,
So basically, depending on the news of the day and what is happening in the Capitol, I'm always thinking about how can we communicate this to the American public. Like you said, you're not the only one, who is not super plugged into politics, because like you open the news and it's like all you see is division, right? Like this said that, he said that, she said that. And I think in our role, we're always trying to think of ways, how can we bring whatever is happening in the Capitol or whatever is happening in Washington, D.C. to the public, and
mm.
making sure that they understand, but it's not something that they don't want to digest.
Okay, wow. Yes.
I know it's a lot.
Sorry. So I was thinking about a lot of things as you were talking, and one thing that came to mind. So your team, you said that you were thinking about different. Like, let's take for today, for example. I'm just curious about how you said that you have to think about all these things and how the reporters are going to do what, and like the camera angles, and how are you going to present the family of the officer that passed away, and in the most honorable and respectable way. And you and your team, you guys are like brainstorming ideas all day and trying to get this information out. Is that what's happening?
Yeah, pretty much. But
Okay.
I think with something like today, it starts about a week before. And so,
Okay.
like, lots of walkthroughs and lots of being in the location, kind of thinking through what would look best, what would be best. And so, I mean, it's a lot of brainstorming, and it's a lot of back and forth between my coworkers and I,
Uh-huh.
because we're kind of like a machine behind the
Right.
member of Congress, right?
Right. That's
Yeah.
crazy, Joy, that you do this. I like such important work, and I'm like so in awe of all of it. But okay. So how I mean, I have a lot of questions, but I'm just gonna get straight to it. Like, how did you get this job? Like, like 'cause I feel like this is
Yeah.
something that is not common, and it seems
Mhm.
like um a job that most people would want. So it seems very competitive. Not that you're not capable, obviously. It's not that's not what I'm saying. I hope you don't misunderstand me, but
No,
it's
no,
just
not at all.
I'm curious to how you ended up here, and even like was this the path that you wanted to take in entering journalism?
Yeah, I mean, as we spoke of earlier, I studied journalism in college. And so, having done that in undergrad, that was always something that I wanted to do ever since I was a little girl. So, I was like, okay, I'm going to do TV journalism. And even though it was very difficult to study it actually in reality and
Mm,
get that dose of reality of like, it's not all glamour and fun, I loved it. I loved learning about reporting, and I loved like the grunt work of being able to put on like a 45-second piece, right,
mm,
on TV. But afterwards, when I graduated, my parents were in Virginia at the time. And so I was like, I'm going to take a month off, and then I'm going to job search. So, I mean, I was a little arrogant at the time, obviously, but young me. But so I took about a month off. And then when I started job searching, for some reason, and it's not that I didn't apply for jobs in TV, but for some reason at that moment, I was like, do I want to move to a very, very small town and start,
Mm.
you know, a whole new life, which is exciting, but also at the time, I don't know, for some reason in my heart, I just felt like the doubt that I hadn't really had before. And then a big part really was to do with my faith, is that I knew that in TV journalism, ultimately you have to work on Sundays. Like the path kind of is for 90% of reporters is to report, then anchor on the weekends, and then become a weekday or week morning anchor, whatever that may be. And so I was like, do I want to purposely go into a career at this point where I know I'm going to have to sacrifice Sundays and
Mm.
being able to worship on Sundays, which to me ultimately is my priority, above any job or profession that I could have. And so I think realizing that at that point, I just kind of threw myself out there and applied for any job that had relation to journalism, like
Mm.
communications, press, event planning, whatever. If anything had any kind of connection, I was like, I'm going to apply for it. And then I got a fellowship, which is a paid internship at this organization that does work for racial justice. And it was a fellowship that lasted for like 3 months. But I went in, I loved it. But during that time, I was always thinking, okay, I have to apply for another job because this is not permanent.
Mm.
But thankfully, that job got extended. And at that point, as I was thinking about what I wanted to do, of course, in my head, I'm like, I'm in DC. I want to work in politics. Like, ooh, I want to be like one of those people with a briefcase, like riding the metro, going to work. Just once again, kind of arrogant at the time. But the thing in DC, as people always say, if you want to get on the Hill, which is Capitol Hill, you have to either have experience or a connection.
Mhm.
It's just kind of a known fact among anybody who lives in DC. And to me, I didn't have either one. I don't have a single connection. I don't know anybody. And I definitely did not have experience on the Hill. And so to me, it was never really an option that I would even get to this point, because it's just like something unsaid, but everybody knows that unless you have a connection or you just have already had internships in school, like it's just not possible. But long story short, I got a posting for a job on the Hill as a press assistant. I didn't know whose office it was in, but I applied for the job. And I didn't even think twice about it because I was like, what's the point? But why not? Let's just apply. And then I got an interview. I interviewed about 3 times for this job. Like there were 3 rounds, and then eventually I got the job, and I started as a press assistant in our office.
Wow.
And yeah, that was 5 years ago.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so
Yeah,
that's so exciting.
and I hope
Like
that made sense.
no, it made perfect sense because I guess that was my real question is like I know that saying, like you got to
Yeah.
know somebody or you had to have
Right.
experience. That makes sense, it's
Hmm.
logical too, as such a high profile, DC is it, if you want to work in politics. So yeah, so my I guess that was my real question is like, did you know someone? Like what happened? And
Like
and
not a thing.
that's that's God, Joy.
Hmm. Yeah.
um but okay, so you got the job and were you
Yes.
y- even in that, like, was there something that you feel like they were looking for, that maybe a reason why they gave it to you? It's a really blunt
You
question, but
know, no, for sure. And I've thought that multiple times. I've wondered that so many times. And I mean, you even my family will tell you, I just cannot put together what exactly it was that
Mm.
allowed me to get to this point, because there's really not a possibility, at least from what we know in human knowledge, because I'm a proud UGA graduate, don't get me wrong, but it's not like an Ivy League school, and I'm surrounded by people who've graduated from Ivy League schools. And I once again, I didn't know anybody. And if I look back to that first interview, I mean, there's so many things I wish I could take back. And the funny thing is, like, the things that I don't really like to hear about politics or my office, like, I feel like I said like 5 of those things in that interview. You
Okay.
know, so it's not like I was like some impressive, like, I don't know, I was saying all the right things. I didn't, because I didn't know. I simply
Mhm.
just did not know. I had no idea what life was like on Capitol Hill. I had no idea these kind of opportunities even existed. And I mean, there really is no answer for it. And I've really, really thought about it through and through. And it's just, I mean, it has to be, like you said, it's God who gave me this opportunity. And I have to trust and believe that to be true, because there's no other way in human possibility that it could have happened.
Well, no, I think you have to give yourself some credit, Joy. I'm sure they were impressed by the things that you said and probably your work too. I'm assuming at you said you were working at a place where it they did racial justice.
Hmm.
And I'm
Right.
sure like a lot of that work was incorporated into what they were looking at in your resume. But all that to say, um you got the job, and then, I mean, was it very, like, eye-opening? Can you tell us a little bit about your first job on Capitol
Oh,
Hill?
yeah. I mean, 100%. Like, it was a culture shock because up until that point, I kind of was very sheltered, and had a very narrow view of the world and my life. And I think coming into not only politics, but a big office where I'm working with, our office probably has about 60 people total, which is way bigger than any typical office on Capitol Hill. So I felt like it was really a growing up experience for me, because not only did I have to do something that I really, was unaware of at the time, like learning how to work with people, not only people my age, but people who have been here for 30 years, and
Mhm.
kind of being able to make my, mark in the office, but also put my head down and get to work, and without um, being a disruption. And so I feel like the first 8 to 9 months when I first started this job were probably some of the most challenging days that I've had. And I still remember them so clearly, because I felt like I was really being pushed out of my comfort zone, not only with the work, because I wasn't used to the work in itself, but really learning how to work with a group of professionals and be an adult in a professional surrounding, that even if you don't know, and even if you're not the smartest person in the room, like, how can I be useful in this place, and kind of finding that, whether it's even going in super early in the morning and leaving, late at night, whatever it may be, just finding that way to contribute in your own way.
Mhm.
But it was hard. It
Mhm.
was such a big culture shock for me in every way. And I did struggle, I think, at the beginning to truly understand what that time meant for me. But now I kind of see it as I really did become like an adult. Like, I grew up, and I feel like I've matured during that time.
Wow. So, I do have a few previous guests that have been on that
Mhm.
have expressed similar sentiments as you, like kind of this imposter syndrome of like fake it till you make it. And like, I like what you said though, like, even though you're not the smartest person in the room, finding areas where you can be valuable, and I feel like that is adulting. Not
Mhm.
just quitting and being like throwing in the towel and be like, well, I can't do it, because I'm not the smartest person in the room. That's really, really great advice, Joy. I'm just, even myself, I'm inspired right now to like be better. um, but yeah, so like, um, before this job, were you plugged into politics? Like, were you savvy in those areas already? Like, were you already interested in those things?
Yeah, I was definitely always very interested in politics, and I loved, I mean, the news was such a already big part of my life, being in journalism school, that I was always
Sure.
very interested.
Mhm.
But did I think that I would be, aware to this degree and this stage of my life? Probably not. But I mean, I probably was just like any, other person who was very interested in politics.
Okay.
I
Okay.
loved it and I loved reading about it, but I also didn't know that I would be into it in this
Right.
manner.
Oh man, so crazy. I can't get over that. It's really awesome. Excuse me. So, uh, you said about the first 9 or 10 months were really challenging, and I was, if you are able to, could you maybe talk about one of those, like a challenging moment for you where you felt like you really had to, I mean, I don't know. I feel like it would be very like just who I am, like putting myself in your shoes, like being a kind of, I'm like kind of a perfectionist. I always just want to like
Mhm.
look good in the eyes of others. It would be really, I feel like it would be really hard for me. But yeah, could you kind of go into a little bit of what you experienced?
Yeah. I think I kind of have a type A personality. And I'm very much like a people pleaser. It's just how I've always been. And so I think I've had this view of the world at that point, like, I can please my way into anything. Like, I'm sure I can, win over my coworkers and everything will be great and dandy. But when I first went into the office, as amazing as it was, like you kind of go through that honeymoon phase, right? Like at any job, like for the first 5, 6 months, you're like, I don't care if this is terrible. I have a new job and this is awesome, And so it kind of was a mix because I was going through that stage of it being a honeymoon, but also like reality hit me so hard in the face of
Mhm.
like, even if I'm doing my best at 110%, it's not always going to be received in the way that I intended. And my work is not always going to be seen in the way that I want it to be seen by others, and you just cannot control what others think of you, of your work. You just don't know how you're going to be received. And I think um and not only in politics but I think in society in general, like when you enter in, it's like you're no longer with just your group of friends who are similar to you. You're not surrounded by your family anymore. You're in a professional setting for a lot of people where work is their number one priority. And I think that when a lot of times you're surrounded in a place where work is number one for so many people. Whereas necessarily it's not like that for you. And it's not because work wasn't important to me, but I feel like for me, there was always a distance between me and my job because um, just having always been, you know, raised by my parents who are strong and incredible Christians and who have always instilled that in me, I feel like one thing I can say with pride, honestly, is that my job has never been my identity. I'm so proud and so grateful for my job. And I thank God, honestly, every day that I still get to do this. But it's not my identity. It's
Mm.
not who I am. And honestly, if God was to tell me tomorrow, you need to walk out of your job and quit, I can say that I can. And
Mm.
I think in society where sometimes so many people spend their time at work, so it does become their number one priority.
Right.
And I think so everybody kind of, if you see something through a different lens, but it's the same thing, sometimes you don't always click with everyone around you, or your
Sure.
work doesn't always get appreciated in the way that you would hope just because, you see work so differently. And I think I kind of had to learn that you cannot please everybody, but also you can work alongside everyone and be helpful to everyone and pave your way in a place that is foreign to you as long as you put your head down, you go to work and you work hard. And
Mm.
I think that takes time though. Like if I feel like in a culture that's not really something that you're used to, it takes
Right.
time for you to get used to, but it also takes time for people to get used to you. And I think having entered in and being at that time the only new person at the time, I kind of struggled with how I could. I guess I mean I wanted to please at that time, but I think ultimately God kind of showed me that it's less about pleasing people and bringing them over to your side or making sure that people see your perspective, but more along the lines of how can I grow myself to be a contributor in this office and to be helpful to everyone around me, um, without always thinking about like what people think about me, if that makes sense.
No, it makes perfect sense. And I think your stance is like so, I mean, yeah, it's humble, and I just feel like it would be so challenging in that kind of environment to change your perspective in that way. But I feel like, you know, because your perspective was that is probably how you it it's probably how you got where you are today, honestly, because I think with everybody, I mean, I don't know. I don't know what the environment is, but like, in a competitive environment, some people tend to react differently than what you just said, right? Instead of being helpful, a lot of people, I'm not talking about your work, but in general, like want to get ahead, right? And so I just am encouraged by what you just said. And I hope people listening will be encouraged too, because I mean, that's really difficult to do, in a place where you want to succeed, but you realize, well, that's not who I am. I'm not like these other people. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like, sorry, I'm just,
Yeah, and I think
I'm,
that's societal. No, you're right. And it's really, I mean, I think that's society, kind of
yes.
how we've been taught to see and think of society in itself. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm an external processor, so I'm just kind of like talking things out as you're saying things. But man, that's really, I don't know if I would have survived, honestly. But that's really amazing.
Mhm.
So Joy, after you did this, you said you were an assistant, correct?
Mhm.
So after that, what were what were the next steps for you after doing that job?
Yeah, so I came into our office as a press assistant. So just within time, I was able to have new opportunities
I
as whether
see.
people left or some openings came up. So eventually I was able to kind of grow into my role now.
That's awesome. Do you have any kind of mentorship, like at your job, or even when you were an assistant?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, so many people, especially on Capitol Hill, have been around for a very long time and they're just like a wealth of knowledge and experience. And I think, especially in our office, because my boss has been in politics for a little while. She has so many women, especially women staffers, who've been with her for a long time and who have always made sure that I was doing okay and reached out to me, always checked in with me. And I think now, 5 years in, I can say that I've definitely been able to cultivate relationships with them where I would consider so many of them, not only women, but especially the women staffers, mentors to me.
That's amazing. Are there a lot of Asian Americans where you work?
I would say not as many as there should be. There definitely aren't a whole lot. I would say that it's growing in number, but it's definitely not very many.
Mm. Okay. So were you, sorry, these questions are just coming to me, but like, were you on Capitol Hill the day that the rioters, I shouldn't call them rioters, they're rioters. Let's just be real here.
Mhm.
But um, invaded the Capitol?
I was not.
Okay.
I was actually supposed to be in that day, but coincidentally, there was kind of a miscommunication. And so I was working from home that day. And then, of course, in the afternoon that happened. And
Yeah.
I mean, it's tragic.
Yes. Oh my goodness. It was so crazy. I
Mhm.
was on my way to Florida to the beach, and my friend, I don't get service, and my friend texted me, "Are you watching the news?" I said, no, what happened? It was mind blowing, honestly. I was in shock. But that's crazy that I'm so glad that you weren't there. Honestly, I'm
Mhm.
really glad that you weren't there. But I mean, even okay, so even that situation on this awful day, um, in that, like, are you responsible for the news that comes out of your office as well that day? Like, you have to coordinate all those things as well, like something like that.
Well, so basically, so many members and staff were in the Capitol that day. They were in the building that day. And so I guess to each of them, like their story is their own to tell. But we did do an interview with my boss afterwards, I think a few days afterwards, on 60 Minutes. And so for us, it kind of was her way to share her story, but also the story of the staff in her office. So we did coordinate that, but it was more of being able to kind of give her an avenue to share in her position because she is of authority.
Right, right. Man, so like uh sorry, there are things I want to ask, but I'm like
Mhm.
treading lightly because like I feel like this is a really big deal. Um and you please feel free to just say no comment. Like okay, like I don't know a lot of things, but like if there are things like that come out of the office that aren't supposed to come out into the news, like how do you guys handle that?
I mean, of course, like every once in a while, those things happen. I would say within our office, it's very unusual. Like
Okay.
I don't know of an occasion that that has happened. But of course, I mean, you read like tweets from reporters, and you're just like, how in the world did they
Mhm.
know about that?
Mhm.
And so, of course, they do have their sources and secret, leaks. But I think what you have to do is just first, I mean, you just have to always remember that no matter what, unless you're with like two people, someone's always watching and someone's listening. And even if we are all on the same team, it also can be misconstrued, right? Like they
Mhm.
may not have intended it to go out that way, but it did become public. And so I think you have to remember always who you are talking to and where you are, in and what situation you're in. But also, I think it's one of those things where you can't really control,
Okay. It
because
was
if
just
people
a
want to talk.
it's just like a question I wanted to ask, like
Yeah.
gossip. Sorry. um, but okay, so let's get back to the technical stuff of your job, Joy. Just for people listening, is there a lot
Mhm.
like what is there a lot of involved like there's a lot of reading, I'm assuming, of the news, but like
Yes.
is there a lot
Mhm.
of writing involved as well?
Yeah, I would say so. A lot of writing. Not as much in our office because we actually have speech writers who do the bulk of the writing. But I would say, I mean, in almost any other member's office, I mean, there are 435 House members. The press team is always writing. They're writing statements, they're writing fact sheets or
Mm,
talking points or whatever it may be to get out to either reporters or even their constituents back home. So
okay.
lots of writing for sure.
Okay. Um, I meant to ask you this at the beginning of our interview, but could you break down what the House of Representatives actually is? For those of
Yeah.
you that don't know what anything about
Yes.
our government, but
No, of course. So Congress, the legislative branch, is made up of two chambers, which is the Senate and the House. And so the House of Representatives has 435 members. And, each little district has its representative. So it's not really based on how many people from each state or whatever, it's based on each district.
Mm,
And the Senate, of course, is two per state. And so those two branches or houses, I should say, make up the Congress,
the
which is the
Congress.
legislative branch. And of course, you've got the executive, which is the White House, the judicial, which is the court. And that kind of brings everything of politics together. But Congress is basically just the Senate and the House where laws are made.
Okay. Yes. Thank you for that clarification. I'm sorry. My
No,
questions today
no.
are all scattered all over the place. I just um have a lot of things coming up as you're talking. So, but anyways, um what do you love about your job, Joy?
I would say, I mean, I love so many things, but the biggest one would be just every day is like a learning experience. So no 2 days are the same. And I think just the evolution and change of what is always happening in the news, but also what's happening legislatively. You kind of get to go with the flow of that. So I would say every day is a learning experience. Things are always changing. So no, nothing is really the same and you don't ever get bored.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Stay busy, it sounds like.
Yes. Yeah.
Like, I mean, what are your hours like? I just can't imagine, like,
Yeah.
I mean, the news doesn't stop, you know?
Yeah.
It's, like, always going. So, yeah, I mean, do you sleep?
Yeah. Sometimes. I mean, we're definitely always on call. Like you're never, you may be physically away from the office, but you're never really not working just because you have to always be in the know and kind of be updated on everything and kind of fill like blank holes where there, are some if needed. And so, I mean, you're just kind of a catch-all. Like there's not really a job description because you're kind of filling whatever is needed at that moment. So you're kind of on call all the time. And I would say before the pandemic, I mean, very, very long hours, early morning, late nights. But because just so few of us are going in, we're still there all day pretty much, but not as much, I would say.
Okay. So, like, isn't that stressful? You like it?
No, I mean, it does take a toll, right? Like, I mean, since you spend so much time there, you don't really have as much time for like hobbies or exercise or whatever it is that people do to relieve stress. Like, I'm like, what is exercise? But no, but I think, when you love what you do, and when you genuinely see it from just a grateful point of view, even though it's draining at times, of course, it's not like rainbows and butterflies all the time. But I think to me, I genuinely feel a joy and an excitement of going to work and being a part of our office just because I feel like it's always a new opportunity, and not
Yeah,
because like, oh my gosh, I work here, but it's just, a new opportunity given to you each day.
sure. Yeah. Okay, so what are some of the things you don't like, if you're allowed to tell me that even without getting in trouble?
I mean, I would say the most challenging part probably is just, how much time is invested into work, for all of us, I think, who work in politics can say you don't have as much time for any, personal things, but
Mm.
also once you've been in it for quite some time, my 5 years of, it seems like
That's a long
really
time.
short, but yeah, I think you kind of learn to find some kind of balance
Mm.
in it. Even though you're busy, you still find a way to be able to kind of relax or to be able to take stress away from you by doing things that you enjoy.
Okay, yeah. I mean, like, it's just so fast paced. I'm like already overwhelmed
Yeah,
just listening to you. But but
I know. I feel like I've just like blurted it out.
no, no. I mean, like, so you mentioned too that like it is like this is a kind of consuming job that you
Hmm.
love. And you mentioned you don't really have time for much else. Um, can I ask you on a personal level, like, does it ever get kind of lonely? Because I would imagine too, like,
Hmm.
you can't really talk that much about your job to other people, right?
Yeah, I mean, definitely you can't be like, oh my gosh, today at
Right.
9 o'clock this happened, and then at 10 o'clock this. Yeah, yeah,
Because I
for
feel like,
sure. But I would say, in terms of, I can't, to be honest, I can't ever say that I felt like a loneliness.
okay.
I mean, just because I think, first of all, physically, like my family and I are very close and we're together, especially when I'm not at work all the time. And so, but I think also, like your coworkers kind of become your family.
Yeah,
And I think when you have that at work, even though a lot of it is just strictly professional, I can't say that I've ever felt really a loneliness.
mm. So I imagine like, okay, because I just watch a lot of TV, right? Like, is it like as cutthroat as they make it? Like everything just seems so like,
Yeah, I know. And I mean, I some parts are. I mean,
okay.
of course, some of it is, dramatized, but I would say some parts of it are very cutthroat and it is very busy and crazy all the time. but of course it's not as glamorous as
Mm.
one might think
Right.
just from the outside, just because, I mean, there are glamorous parts, of course,
Yeah.
but not always 24/7. I'm not like all day. Yeah.
Well,
It's definitely work. Yeah.
speaking of glamorous parts of the job, I did see that you attended the inauguration. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah. Well,
How
I was working.
you're
Yeah.
sorry, you were working. Right. You were not. I mean, like, what a special day.
Yeah.
Um, how was it? Like, just working that event?
Mm-hmm.
Can you even call it
Yeah.
an event? It's still, I feel like it
Right. Right.
minimizes it, but
I know. I mean, it was leading up to it, I feel like, just because there's so much talk about planning and this and that, what needs to get done and how does this happen. Um, I mean, I was always very excited for it, but it didn't feel as real just because when you're looking at from a work perspective, you don't always think about, oh my
sure.
gosh, it's the inauguration. But on that day, we got up very, very early. I mean, it was like 5 a.m. And of course, the security was really tight. So you had to get in at a certain point. Um, but once the inauguration started, which now I'm blanking, but I think around like 11 a.m., once the music started playing and everything was happening, and even though I was still working, I just got like a wave just came over me, and I just got so overwhelmed.
Mm.
And I started like tearing up and crying because I just couldn't believe it. And I just was so overwhelmed with like gratitude that out of all people, God would give someone like me this opportunity to be here and to work at an event in a place like this. And something just came over me, and I just started crying because I couldn't believe it. And I think just the fact that I was even able to say that I was standing there, in that moment, all of a sudden it just became unbelievable. Even though like months ahead, I knew I was going to work, and I mean it was incredible. That's really the only way I can describe it. It was amazing.
Yeah, wow. I mean, I think it's not the same feeling. I cannot compare you and I experiences in the inauguration. But like just being in a moment where you feel like, oh, God has a plan for my life, you
Hmm.
know? And I feel like
Yeah.
that's probably part of what it is that you're feeling. And it is. It's an incredible feeling. It was so beautiful. The whole inauguration was so beautiful. And man, that is really cool. You guys,
Yeah.
you can do this if it's possible.
Definitely. Yeah, 100%.
Oh gosh, that's so cool. Well, Joy, was there anything else that I didn't ask that maybe you wanted to share with people listening? If there's not, it's okay, but
No, I mean, I would just say, if anybody is interested in doing something in politics or something similar, I would say don't always, be discouraged by the path that people say that you have to take or should have taken.
mm,
There's no cookie cutter way to get to the job that you envision or want to do. And I truly believe that it's about like the desire in your heart, but also how you pursue it, not necessarily in the things that you do, the internships, the people but I think in going about it in a way where you're just available to work and willing
mm,
to work hard. And I mean, take it from me, I definitely don't have the same path that a lot of people in politics do, but I've been given this opportunity with, for some reason, for some um, plan that God has for me. So I would say don't always get discouraged by what people say that you should be
mm.
doing or should have done.
That's awesome. Yes, thank you so much for that piece of advice. I think it's something that is necessary and that we all need to hear today. Um, Joy, one last question before we end our time together. I'm curious on a practical level. Um, are there some like characteristics or qualities about yourself that you feel like have benefited you in this job that maybe someone that is like hearing this and is like, oh, that sounds really interesting, but everyone has strengths and weaknesses. So
Hmm.
yeah, if you don't mind maybe highlighting some of your strengths that maybe help you in kind of, um, yeah, doing your job well.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, I don't know that this is particularly a strength of mine, but one thing that is definitely helpful is being able to kind of bring people together or build relationships very naturally. You
Mm,
know, I think when I think politics, one of the biggest things I think is relationships. You know, you have to build relationships with your coworkers, your boss, other people in other offices, kind of help bring people together in different offices as well. And so I would say a big strength that definitely could be helpful in a career in politics is being able to kind of easily bring people together, but also build a relationship with someone and have
mm.
that rapport and first interaction comfortably.
Yeah, I feel like that would be extremely important,
Yeah.
especially in all the coordinating that you guys do as
Hmm.
well, and
Yeah.
how you represent the person that you're working for. That would be
Hmm.
really important. Yeah, I
Yeah.
just feel like that's what I want people to know here as they listen to is kind of where their strengths are and the different kinds of jobs and careers there are out there for them to exercise what they're good at. So thank you
Hmm.
again for sharing that part of your life, Joy. And um,
Of course.
really grateful for all your vulnerability today and your transparency. Um, but hey, guys, if you enjoyed this episode, please feel free to reach out. If you have any questions, I know someone on the Hill.
You've got a connection. Yeah.
But Joy, would that be okay with you? I know you're super
Yes,
busy,
of
but if
course. No, I would love that.
awesome. Thank you so much again for
Hmm.
your time. Thanks so much for listening, guys. If you have any questions, feel free to email me at podcastwigu@gmail.com. Until next time, bye.